So a couple of weeks ago, I was able to visit Joanne and her family to walk through memorial service plans. I knew that she was on hospice, but the note on the front door informing visitors to keep their stay under 15 minutes because visits were especially exhausting opened my eyes to the tenderness of the situation. I got there a little bit early, and Sean, Joanne's husband, asked me to wait for a few minutes while she was preparing for the visit. Standing on the front porch, I thought to myself, well, this is really intense and kind of strange. About 10 seconds down that line of thought, I realized, yes, this is intense, but this is actually not strange at all. I had not been in this exact situation. This family had not navigated this journey of dying before, at home on hospice. There was a particularity about the situation, and yet, throughout time, we humans have experienced death of loved ones. In our modern age, with hospitals and nursing homes, death is slightly removed and less of an everyday affair for us. Still, it's one of the few nearly universal human experiences. If we live and love, we will also grieve the loss of someone. And many of us will accompany someone through the journey of dying. And while this experience is intense, it is not unique. Death and grief that accompany it are in some ways one of the most universal experiences among our human family. Now, one of the complications of grief is that it can bring strange feelings of loneliness or isolation. No matter how hard we try, we can never step directly into the shoes of another person. We cannot experience the same loss that they have. Each of our losses is unique because each of our relationships is unique. Even within the same family, the death of one person is experienced differently. Losing a spouse is different from losing a parent. And siblings usually have slightly different relationships with the same parent. In this way, even within the same family, relating to the loss of the same person, the grief can be quite different. Not only are relationships particular, so are the types of loss. Members of the military experience loss in ways that few of us can wrap our heads around. Losing a sibling or a child has a particularly rough edge to it. It's just all very different. Caused by violence or accident or disease. A friend of mine experienced loss in a particularly strange accident or workplace incident. One day on campus, one coworker stabbed another viciously and then took his own life. My friend had been in meetings with both of these people the day before. I don't name all these as a reminder of how harsh the world can be. I name them because they're all very different. It seems when we combine the types of loss with the particular types of relationship, grief can manifest itself in infinite ways. There's a loneliness in that uniqueness of grief. And while each loss is unique, you are in good company with countless others who have navigated their own unique loss. One of the most famous stories of Buddhism describes this. Kisa Gautami was the wife of a wealthy man. After losing her only child, Kisa Gautami became so desperate and asked anyone if they could help. Her sorrow was so great that people thought she had lost her mind. That little piece of the story, to me, was a window into how poorly we have treated grieving people for a very long time. But eventually, an elder told her to go visit the Buddha. And the Buddha told her that he could bring the child back to life if she could find white mustard seeds from a family where no one had died. With this new hope, she desperately went from house to house for these special mustard seeds. But to her disappointment, she could not find a single home that had not suffered the death of a family member. Finally, the realization struck her that there is no house free from loss or mortality. She returned to the Buddha, who comforted her and taught her the Dharma. And legend says that this experience paved her way to find enlightenment. I recently read a book that interpreted the story as a way of dismissing the woman's suffering. I see the story somewhat differently. Keeping in mind that compassion is at the core of Buddhism, the Buddha never said her loss wasn't real or painful. He didn't dismiss it as unimportant. What he did was help her see that this thing that she was experiencing, this heartache, is part of the human experience. It's not something to be ignored or avoided. It's something to be confronted and known directly. I want to talk a little bit about supporting others who are grieving. We tend to feel weird around people who are grieving. But here's the deal. They feel even more weird being out in the world among people who don't carry that same acute sense of loss. So my very blunt message would be, suck it up. And don't avoid people who have recently gone through a loss. They have done the hard work of getting dressed and leaving the house, or these days, showing up online. The least we can do is offer a friendly greeting and have a conversation. Part of feeling awkward is not knowing what to do or what to say, I know. Here's the beauty in that. They know you and what you are good at. And we all have different skills that may be called upon in challenging times. That may be listening or distracting with some fun or some logistical help. In times of loss, we sort through friends for the resources we know that they have in abundance. It's also okay to just flat out ask, would it be helpful for you to have some fun distraction or a listening ear? Or maybe I can run a few loads of laundry for you or clean up around the house. If the answer is, I don't want to talk about it, let's go watch a movie, that's okay. Life doesn't need to be a 24-hour therapy session in those phases of grief. In fact, it shouldn't be. Distraction and some joy are okay. They're necessary. And if you find someone needs to talk more than you are comfortable with, it's okay to encourage them to join our grief group at Tapestry or to talk to me or Celia. It's okay to encourage people to seek support. Some of the most helpful moments in my life were times when I was directed to the type of care that I needed. But that suggestion requires a little tenderness. Don't tell someone it's time to get over your loss or get better. Grief doesn't work that way. I think we all know this by now. What these resources aim for, both the grief group or one-on-one conversations, is just some help navigating it. and to provide an opportunity to be with people who are equipped to listen. There are as many ways of being helpful as there are different types of grief. Sometimes the most challenging thing to navigate is what to do when nothing can be done. This is especially challenging for the type A people among us who like to go and fix the problem and solve things and make things better. Basically, Unitarian Universalists. It's also challenging for caregivers who have found meaning in the innumerable tasks involved in supporting those we love. But there are times in life when all the errands and planning and medications and meals have been taken care of. The Reverend Barbara Peskin writes about the learning she encountered accompanying her sister through the dying process. There were many little things that could be done, and countless little things that were frustrating, that were just outside of her control. She writes, I reminded myself repeatedly to not be irritated with myself for doing something wrong, or for forgetting something, or for some ache of my own. Not just because my small irritations were comparatively beside the point, but also because my sister was sensitive to changes in our emotional climate. I had to figure out more than once that irritability with the small things, with things I could not control, were standing in for the great thing about which none of us could do anything. Much of navigating grief, both our own and the grief of people that we care about, is facing the horrible question of what to do when nothing can be done. Of course, this doesn't just apply to those big final questions and mortality. Life is full of changes, some good, some bad, most of them beyond our control. Woven into that dynamic journey comes a degree of fear. Again, Barbara Peskin writes, so what do you do when nothing can be done? I've got a list. You probably have your list, but this is mine. When nothing else can be done, slow down, that is, pause, if only for a few seconds. Breathe. Call a friend, cry, walk. Drink less caffeine and alcohol, and drink more water. Watch television less and daydream more. Do something for someone else. Go visit someone you like. Get quiet. Meditate or pray to whatever God or good you trust receives you. I know some of you do this already. When you do pray, give your praying the weight it deserves. Let it be life-giving. The last thing I want to share with you about grief this morning is something that you have certainly heard, but it bears repeating. That is that grief is a process. And there are different theories of what that process entails. I'm not going to hang my hat on any one of those theories. It seems to me that if people have posed different types of process, that means they're going through different processes themselves. But what I will tell you for certain is that grief changes over time. It doesn't dry up and blow away all at once. It doesn't even necessarily progress smoothly in one direction, from most painful to more comfortable. It just evolves. That's because the memories of our loved ones live on with us. Those memories aren't forever stuck in one moment of time. As time passes, we gain new perspective on our relationship and appreciate the nuances of that person in different ways. Like anything in life, some distance changes our perspective. As we live on and continue to grow, we experience how they accompany us in new stages of our life. I experienced this most strongly in my appreciation of my grandmother. She died at least 15 years ago. At that stage in my life, she was still a bit of a parental figure. Very sweet, but not very relatable to my late 20-year-old self. As I learned more about history, I am awed by her career as a bookkeeper, and that she traveled from her rural life in the Mississippi Delta to serve as administrative support in Washington, D.C. during World War II. As a child, I knew her as someone to turn to for support. Only in the past few years did I learn that she played that role in the wider community for young people when my parents were children and young adults. Among the neighborhood, it was known that when life turned upside down, hers was the kitchen table to show up to. She is a terrible cook, by the way. This was not for the food. This was for a wise heart. I wish I could share my life with her today, mostly because I now realize how much both of us would enjoy that. More than just a doting grandmother that I knew as a child, she was a more remarkable woman who inspires me today, and I know that now. It's often said that people live on through our memories of them. Those memories aren't set in stone in the past. Those we have lost live on with us through our struggles and successes. And because of that, grief cannot stay the same. It evolves as our relationship does, even though they're no longer with us in body. There are innumerable types of grief and just as many ways to process it. Whatever your loss, or your joy, or your in-between, there is space for all of that here in this beloved community. Amen.